Welcome back to F1 Report, everyone. That's the 2020 Italian Grand Prix in the bag, and wow, what a fantastic race. Easily the best we've had all year. We had a thrilling race which included safety cars, a red flag, and a podium which didn't include Mercedes, Red Bull, or Ferrari for the first time I can remember in a long time. The conditions for the race were nice and warm. This contributed to some cooling issues we saw with the Mercedes in particular, where they had to run out of slipstreams in order to get into cool air into their intakes. We didn't see those issues extend to the tyres, however. This is because we had a safety car and a red flag in the pit window, meaning that we didn't really see any tyres wearing out at all. Before we get stuck in, let's have a look at how the teams lined up after qualifying. We had a Mercedes front row lockout with Hamilton first and Bottas second. A fantastic second row with Sainz third and Perez fourth. Then we had Verstappen in fifth alongside Norris in sixth, Ricciardo in seventh, Stroll eighth, Albon ninth, and Gasly rounding out Q3 with 10th. Kvyat was in 11th with Ocon in 12th. Leclerc was the first Ferrari on home soil in 13th with Raikkonen right behind him in 14th. Magnussen and Grosjean side by side in 15th and 16th. Vettel in the second Ferrari going out in Q1 in 17th. Giovinazzi in 18th, and then Williams bringing up the rear with Russell in 19th and Latifi in 20th. As we can see, Ferrari having a dismal home race. Red Bull not doing great either. Albon particularly struggled all through all the qualifying sessions. So it's a bit of a weird one. So that's how we lined up going into the race. Now let's take a look at how the race itself went. I'll start off by saying an amazing top three and an Italian team on the top step of the podium as well. We weren't expecting that. Gasly with his first race win and only the second for Toro Rosso / AlphaTauri. What a result for them. Circumstance may have played a part, and we'll cover that a bit later, but he was more than skilled enough not only to capitalise but also thrive. In second we had Sainz, who also drove a terrific race. Even before the red flag he was running second, very well in second as well. And in third we had Stroll, who definitely benefited from the red flag by getting a free pit stop and may actually be disappointed with his result. He was on for the win if he'd kept his cool at the restart. A bit further back from them was Norris in fourth, who had a good race with some nice overtakes, especially with Bottas, who ended up in fifth after a terrible first lap. He really struggled to overtake, at one point complaining he was not able to turn the engine up. Behind him was Ricciardo in sixth, and in seventh we had Hamilton after a good recovery drive due to him dropping to the back of the grid. I'll cover that a bit later as well. In eighth we had Ocon, ninth Kvyat, rounding out the points was Perez in 10th. The positions of Kvyat and Perez really show how fortunate Gasly and Stroll were when it came to the safety cars and red flag, giving them a bit of a helping hand. In 11th was Latifi, and I so wish he'd gained just one more place. It would have been a lovely moment for Claire Williams to leave on, but sadly not this time. Grosjean was in 12th, Raikkonen 13th after running second at one point, Russell in 14th, Albon in 15th. He just had a dismal race. He just had a dismal weekend, let's put it that way. And finally we had Giovinazzi in 16th. He was also in third at one point. That's right, you heard me correctly, we had both Alphas in the top three at one point in this race. That's how crazy it was. Verstappen, Leclerc, Magnussen and Vettel were our DNFs this time out. Verstappen had an engine issue, the Red Bull retired the car before it got any worse. Magnussen also had an engine issue, however he stopped off to the side of the track, triggering that first safety car, and we'll get into that in a second. Vettel had a brake failure but managed to run slowly until he got back to the pits, so he was fine. Leclerc was the worrying one though. He lost at the final corner and was sent into the tyre barrier at incredibly quick speed. It looked really scary. Fortunately it looks like he was okay, hopefully he is, fingers crossed for a speedy recovery. That incident triggered the second safety car, which then became the red flag as the stewards had to repair the tyre barrier. So enough teasing, let's get into the main meat of things. We'll start with that first safety car, as this was the one that caught Hamilton and Giovinazzi out. As I mentioned earlier, Magnussen had stopped at the side of the track, which usually prompts a virtual safety car, while the marshals moved the car down one of the runoffs. However, in this case, the marshals decided it would be best to move the car down the pit lane as it was nearby. This meant a full safety car. So, pretty straightforward, right? We then saw Hamilton dive in, as he'd done tons of times when the safety car is deployed. Giovinazzi did the same as well. But only those two drivers. That's because the marshals had closed the pit lane whilst they were working on bringing the car down there, meaning that Hamilton and Giovinazzi and their teams as well ignored this closure and were put under investigation. Shortly after the restart from the safety car, with Hamilton and Giovinazzi still under investigation, we then had a second safety car for Leclerc's high-speed crash. The pit lane was open this time round, so everybody dived in for new tyres except for Hamilton, Giovinazzi, Stroll and anybody else who had pitted before the first safety car. I believe it was Gasly, Raikkonen and Latifi. Stroll was the outlier here as he hadn't stopped at all yet. He'd done 0 stops. This is what shook up the grid to a massive degree, as those drivers I just listed were now our top 6 with about 20 laps to go. The safety car then turned into a red flag to clear up those tyre barriers, which meant all the teams go back to their garages and are allowed to replace damaged parts and, most importantly for Stroll, change tyres. This meant he was now running in a legitimate second place with no pit stops. It was also during this red flag time that we learned of the punishments handed to Hamilton and Giovinazzi, a 10-second stop and go penalty for each, which, given the red flag and the fact they need to take it within the first 3 laps of the restart, means they'll be certainly at the back of the grid and by some margin too. I believe both drivers lost about 30 seconds in total. But the weird stuff wasn't done there. We then restarted the race from the grid rather than having a rolling start, which I've never seen before, but I kind of liked it actually. We had Hamilton first at this point, but we knew he was going to have to take his penalty and that he wouldn't be able to fight back to the front end of the grid. So we were looking at Stroll and Gasly for the winner. Sainz and Norris were in the mix too, but a bit further back, so they're at a bit of a disadvantage. At the restart, we saw Stroll have a terrible time with a lack of grip, being passed by Gasly and eventually Sainz as well. Hamilton took his penalty as soon as he could, began fighting back through the field, all the way back up to 7th. Phew, I think that just about covers it. I think that explains how we got to the grid we got to. It was a hell of a race though, and what an advert for Formula 1 too. It's one of those races that we get occasionally that is remembered fondly for years. I really hope we can have something similar next time out, and we won't have to wait long. Mugello is next weekend for the Tuscan Grand Prix. What did you guys think of the race? Were you excited as I was? Let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one.